Ms. Bartasi, Gina, welcome back to Inside Reproductive Health.
Thank you. Thanks, Griffin. Nice to be with you.
What has Kindbody been up to in the last two and a half years since we spoke? Nothing, right?
Nothing, not anything at all.
Damn thing from you all.
Sitting, twiddling our thumbs, trying to figure out what we're going to do next. I've always said the success of any business is only about its people. And so we have an extraordinary team. The team has parlayed their knowledge and experience into a tremendous amount of growth, right? So today we have 26 locations, not the least of which is the new Vios clinics that will pull into the Kindbody network. That acquisition closed February 1st, and then those Vios locations will be rebranded Kindbody. But Angie Beltsos is one of a kind. I know that the audience is aware of all the PE money rolling up practices in the industry. We are not a roll-up firm. We preferred to build de novo, but Angie is unique. She is extraordinarily talented as a physician, and she is even more talented as a clinical leader. Just as a leader in general, she knows a tremendous amount about business, about productivity, about margin. And so, we have 26 locations. We'll be adding another 10 this year for 36 locations by the end of the year. And then we're back in the employer business. So we see quite a bit of interest from the employer business. Certainly our consumer audience that we started with is still a big part of our revenue. And then we see quite a bit of payments come from the managed care industry. So
I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Is Vios the first acquisition that Kindbody has done in terms of practices?
Vios the first acquisition. I've done quite a few acquisitions in my career, but it may be the first one at Kindbody. It should be an easy answer. We haven't bought any other clinics. I'm trying to think if we've bought anything else. I guess not. So Vios is the first. It will be the last multi-site, multi-physician practice we acquire. Again, we prefer to build de novo. We wouldn't rule out some.
This podcast lives forever, Gina. You really want to say it will be the last?
No, but listen to what I said, though, Griffin. It'll be the last multi-physician, multi-site acquisition we make. We may make some tuck-in acquisitions, right?
Yeah, but even that, you're why rule that out?
Because I know the multi-site physician groups, and they're already owned by one of our peers. There are not a lot of multi-physician groups still standing that are independent. There's probably less than 10 in the entire country. And the 10 are holding
multi-physician and multi-site, meaning more than one lab. Is that what you mean?
That is exactly right. That is exactly right. Because we wouldn't be interested in, it's too easy, thanks to our extraordinary real estate team, for us to stand up a clinic with a lab. They've gotten very proficient at it in the last 12 months. So the reason we would make a multi-physician, multi-location acquisition is to get scale. There is not, again, there's probably less than 10 of those. So yes, they're multi-physician, but maybe they only have one lab and then one satellite office, which would rule them out. So that's the reason it's an emphatic statement. I think, we're getting a lot of requests now from the employer market to think about international expansion. And so potentially internationally, we wouldn't rule it out, but in the United States, and Angie and Angie knows everybody as well. We're looking for physicians that are like-minded. Angie, she's wildly unique. And so she's amazing. And we have so many other amazing physicians, but there's a culture at Kindbody, and Angie believes in that culture. The culture was almost identical to what Vios' culture was. We prioritize patient care. The patient always comes first. Our employees come first, and so there was this real foundation, and we're here to serve others. And so that's it's one of the things that makes Angie and Vios so unique. And it's also the reason I think we're limited in terms of other potential acquisition targets is it's rare to so seamlessly be able to put two companies together that agree on so many things. Usually when you're rolling up things or you're putting two things together, there's a lot of friction. The integration is hard. There's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of debate about, and you just don't have any of that. You just don't have any of that. We are incredibly like-minded. Now we've known each other a decade, and that probably helps as well.
Well, I want to ask about how you did that vetting, because it reminds me a little bit of like the Facebook, Instagram story where Zuckerberg said, most of the time we're not going to do acquisitions. Most of the time we're going to be building out Facebook property, now Meta properties, but at the time they saw something that was perfectly in line with what they were trying to do. They stole Instagram at the time for $2 billion, and it totally fit. And so that's what you're describing with the Vios acquisition. But how did you vet it to that point?
Yeah, again, I think knowing Angie and Greg for more than 10 years was extraordinarily beneficial. We had talked on and off for the last several years. I've thought Angie was just as unique as I think she is today. I thought that the first time I met her 10 years ago. I met her at PCRS, and she's so articulate. She listens first. Most leaders talk first and listen second. Angie listens first and talks second. And that's a rare characteristic, to be both a leader and an extraordinary listener. A lot of leaders are not as humble as Angie is. Angie's extraordinarily humble. And so I would watch her. I would watch her in meetings. I would watch her interact. I was like, wow, she is a total badass. And, I always wanted to work with her. I did work with her. I worked with her at Fertility Authority. I worked with her at Progeny. And as time grew on, the affinity grew more. Like she continued to impress me. And she continued to raise the bar. I knew her when she was at FCI. I watched her grow Vios. She does everything with a tremendous amount of elegance too, and class. And that's hard to do. It is really, really hard to scale a business and grow a company that fast and keep your cool and take the high road and work hard and not lose it while you're trying to juggle all these things. And she just did it, and I watched her. And so anyway,
she does do that, by the way. No, I don't talk about things that happen in business meetings on the air, but just at a super high level, I think Dr. Bells is comfortable with me saying she does that. She will be quiet and let everybody talk, and then it's like, all right, and then she's on. So like she lets people say it, and you can see her processing, and then boom, she's got it. So you described her well. So that got you into the Midwest. You found this really good culture fit for you all, acquiring Vios, and now you're in the Midwest. What cities are on the docket that you can tell us about now?
Yeah. Well, we want to be completely transparent, so we don't mind sharing with the audience, but we're opening Seattle, we're opening Dallas, Houston, Orange County, Miami, Charlotte. We're opening Washington, D.C. next week. 2 weeks, sorry, May 4th, whenever that is. Oh, maybe it's in more than 2 weeks. Maybe it's in 3 or 4 weeks. What am I missing? Should be like, we've opened 2 already. We opened Denver 2 weeks ago. We'll open Dallas in 3 weeks. Excuse me, Denver. What did I say? DC, Dallas, Houston. I'm missing some. But anyway, that's kind of the footprint. Oh, we're opening Brooklyn, a 3rd location in New York. I should have the map in front of me, but that gives you a general idea.
It gives me an idea of the near term. In a few years' time, are we talking about everywhere Gina's at the play? Like, are we going to see Kindbody Cleveland? Are we going to see Kindbody Buffalo? Are we going to see
Columbus? We're actually coming to Columbus before we're coming to Cleveland. We're taking, and we're adding a location in the East Bay. So both New York, San Francisco, and LA will all have 3 locations. But I think that's right. Our plan calls for 50 locations within the next 2 years. We want to be where our patient population lives and works. The majority of those locations will be retail in nature. We, believe in the consumerism of healthcare and really building a global brand. We talk about a national brand, so our eyes are set on the US over the next 24 months, but in 3 to 5 years, I think you would see Kindbody locations internationally as well.
I want to talk about that global brand and what Kindbody has done to get to what you have now. I am jotting that down because I want to ask you a little bit more about. I don't know if the employer benefit side was part when we spoke a few years back on this show, and so what has changed in employer benefits from when you started Fertility Authority and then Progeny, that whatever, what was that, 7 years ago
Yeah,
or
7 years ago. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
so what has changed since then that you feel like, okay, we need to be a part of this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's changed is employers now recognize that having a fertility benefit has gone from a nice to have to a must have. Today, there is a robust RFP process. There wasn't any RFP process. There wasn't anybody to RFP the business to. It was kind of Progeny. And then I think you had some legacy players, whether that was Win or ARC, but they really weren't in the employer business. Like Progeny had no competition the first 4 or 5 years, and then they've got their hands full now. In the last couple of years, there are several kind of other Progeny Me Too's, whether you again, you see Carrie, you see Store Club, you see Maven coming in, and they do care navigation. We sit independent from those folks because we're in the provision of care. So we can also do care navigation, which we would argue is table stakes, but really only 3 things matter in healthcare, any kind of healthcare, but specifically fertility: patient experience, patient outcome, and cost. It's the only thing that matters to the patient experience, patient outcome, and cost. And by the way, it's the only thing that matters to the employer. And what I have found after building and running the largest care navigation firm, as a care navigation or middleman or an insurance company, you cannot effectuate change in those 3 areas. An insurance company or a care navigation firm cannot affect member experience. They cannot affect outcomes, and they cannot affect cost. Only the doctor's going to set his reimbursement rate. He's only going to decide how many embryos to transfer. Only he can decide how to give that patient bad news, whether that's a diminished ovarian reserve diagnosis or a failed IVF cycle. But in order to really effectuate change and really change kind of how patients go through the process, you have to be in the doctor business. So today, the employers are issuing RFPs. I think in the beginning, large tech companies on both coasts, or really in the Valley, kind of started this fertility benefit. But today, you see requests coming in from very, very large employers in retail and manufacturing and automotive. Like again, it's moved from kind of a nice to have to a must have benefit.
For that reason, though, wouldn't those other companies say that Kindbody is not independent, that they're independent because they're not in the provision of care, and that you're able to manipulate the market if you end up becoming the Jeff Bezos or the Sam Walton of it?
Yeah. Well, so we have partner clinics who are very like-minded. We have other clinics that are not like-minded and they don't join our network, but there's a bunch of clinics that prioritize patient care and are very genuine about patient care. And they see a lot of volume from us now, a lot of volume from us. So I think that concern of, okay, if Kindbody sells directly to the employers, they're going to keep all the business. We have too many other partner clinics willing to attest that that's just not the case. I think in the beginning there was worry, but we've been at this, a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And we have clinics again that would attest to Kindbody treats us fairly. They pay well, they pay on time. Like there's just too many people out there advocating exactly the opposite. Now, our job is to continue to improve member experience every step of the way. And so, we prioritize patient experience, and we do think, we hear from patients, the way patients experience and go through that Kindbody journey is very different than many of the other primarily legacy practices. There are some new clinics again that I think are again very like-minded in our peer group that we have a lot of respect for. It's mutual. But going through Kindbody, utilizing our proprietary technology is a very different process than a legacy clinic where you fill out a paper chart, the nurse calls you, gets your voicemail, you get to call them back, they get to call you back, they get to, like all of that waste and inefficiency and telephone tag that's endemic in the legacy fertility programs, as well as the legacy care navigation firms. The challenge with the care navigation firms is, once you refer that patient to another clinic, you lose sight of them. You don't even know if the patient showed for their appointment, much less whether they had an ultrasound scan. And for the employer, that they don't even know if they're being double billed. They may have major medical, and you could bill that. You could build the ultrasound scan through major medical. You could also bill the ultrasound scan through your fertility care navigation firm. But there's a lot of waste in healthcare and in the fertility industry that we seek to continue to get rid of and operate more efficiently. And I think the employers, and I know the patients see that today, the member experience is significantly different. And I use member and patient as the same thing. Patients are the consumer terminology. Member is what employers call their consumers, or their employees are called members.
So how do you scale this out at a time when REIs are bottlenecked with 1,100 of them in the entire country? We have far more people that need treatment than we have an infrastructure to be able to treat them. And so how are you able to expand how many people are able to be treated? What's the role of OBGYNs or physician extenders in your model?
Yeah. I think everybody acknowledges today you have to have APPs, you have to have physician extenders. You just do. There's more than demand than supply. And the number one thing that hurts a patient is having to wait 3, 6, 9 months for treatment. I would tell you that, again, Angie Beltsos, your question is about scale and how we serve up enough REIs to handle all of the demand. That is Angie Beltsos's wheelhouse. You look at the physician productivity of her doctors, and it's extraordinary. One of her lead physicians did more than 1,000 cases last year. That's extraordinary. Now you have to have the mindset, you have to have the support around you, you have to have the APPs around you. Again, I've spent 12 years in the industry, and a lot of doctors I talk to are very comfortable doing 150 cases a year. And they say that, listen, I do 10 to 12 cases a month. I sell an IVF cycle for $25,000, and that's my model. I'm like, okay, well, here are our success rates and here are yours. And I just don't think patients, we have one mission, and that is to increase accessibility for all. Fertility treatment has been reserved for rich white people on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and the Bay Area and Beverly Hills. And we think there is something tragically wrong with charging $25,000 for an IVF cycle and insisting on cash pay. We think the model has to change. You have to bring down the cost of care. You can have a premium experience without a premium price tag. Griffin, the question is, how do you do that? Well, you utilize technology, and you use technology to replace everything that's transactional in healthcare. Scheduling an appointment, we are the only fertility clinic that I'm aware of that allows you to schedule an appointment, move an appointment, cancel an appointment. You can pay your copay. Like, everything that's transactional should not be done by an REI. It should not be done by your front desk manager. It should not be done by your RN. It should not be done by any of those people. It should be done by technology. How do you pay for everything else? You do it online. Like, this industry is incredibly archaic, that there's all this telephone tag in doing simple things like paying copays and scheduling an appointment, or even hearing your medication. Like, you're walking down the street, you're driving, and a nurse calls and says, turn up or down your FSH drug, and you're trying to write and drive, and it's incredibly emotional. Like, all that's bad. So we own our own patient portal and our EMR. So everything's incredibly transparent. You can pick it up. And by the way, if you forget what the doctor said, you can go right back to your patient portal and remember what the doctor said. So we believe that we can get to scale and extraordinary physician capacity, but we have to have like-minded physicians. The physician that says to us, I only want to do 10 to 12 cases a month, is not the right fit for Kindbody. And if Dr. Beltsos were on this call, she would say the same thing. And that doesn't mean that we want the physicians working harder. It does simply mean we just want them more efficient. Instead of taking down the patient's credit card or calling the patient's insurance company to help them understand why same-sex male couple cannot conceive and meet the 12-month threshold that your legacy benefits provider has in place. Like all of that needs to go away so that the REI is doing things only the REI is capable of doing.
So I've got to decide, because I'm not Joe Rogan with a 3.5-hour format, that I've got to decide which of these 4 or 5 subtopics that I want to go down that you talked about. Let's start with the, talk about, like, we agree that we're at a point where we have to use advanced providers. The debate is to what extent. And I just had the CEO of Mate Fertility on debating this topic with Dr. John Storment. And I don't know if that episode will drop before or after yours, but it's very much a debate of to what extent. And so what is the limit of, in your view, of where advanced providers can be used, or where trained non-REI OBGYNs can be used?
So you should know that I do not make any clinical decisions. I have never made any clinical decisions. I don't make clinical decisions today. Dr. Angie Beltsos, our CEO of Clinical, will make all of those decisions. Today, we use REIs to do all retrievals and all transfers exclusively. Okay. Now, people know Kindbody, and the knock is, oh, you guys have OBGYNs. Well, 20% of our revenue is GYN. We do complex GYN, right? I mean, again, what we prioritize the patient. Okay. We just do. And we think when you have an ectopic, the worst thing we can do is send you back to a primary care. Or if you have a miscarriage, the worst thing we can do is send you back to some doctor that doesn't have your medical record to go back and do a surgery that can be done by our OBGYN on site. You build an affinity with this brand and this REI doctor. You hear patients talk about all the time, oh, my fertility doctor, now I have to go back to my primary care doctor to get a DNC. Like, something's wrong with that. That's archaic healthcare that has all these silos and bifurcation, and no one cares about the patient. Do my medical records follow me from my primary care, from my OBGYN to my REI, to my mental health specialist, to my nutrition coach? The answer is no, unless you're at Kindbody. At Kindbody, we built the entire company around the patient. And we said, okay, we're going to blow everything up. We agree that the current model is broken. It's not anybody's fault. It's just history, right? That's how it was created. The REI set over here in the primary care. It's because of how insurance pays for historically, didn't cover fertility, but yes, covered major medical and maternity. But today, again, if you're prioritizing the patient doesn't want to be shuffled to all of these different providers. They just want a baby. They want it as affordably and as nicely and as kindly and as easily and conveniently as possible. And it's not that hard, but it does mean like breaking some traditional rules that says, okay, your OBGYN and your REI cannot be under the same roof together. We think that's silly and not patient friendly.
Well, you talked about as part of that you're not going to make these clinical decisions. That's why Dr. Beltsos is CEO of Clinical. And I have to say, Gina, I'm incredulous when CEOs say this a bit, because to me, it's not like there's not a perfect divide in everything. There's things overlap a bit. And an example that I was challenging Dr. Andrew Meikle on this from the Fertility Partners. And I gave an example of, we have a client that's kind of like one that you talked about, that happy doing 150, 200 cycles, the sweetest person, the sweetest people that really love their patient are definitely not charging them a lot. Definitely they are below market rates. This individual sees all of their own, this individual does the ultrasounds for all of the patients. Yeah. And so, if I were like, to me, that's where, when you're saying like, we get rid of these transactional things that the REI does not need to be doing. That's something that the REI does not need to be doing, in my view, business guy Griff that owns no part of his business. But if I own part of someone's business, I think that I would be making that call. And that's an overlap where the standard of care matches with or overlaps with the transactional, isn't it?
Well, so again, this goes back to why Vios and Kindbody were so meant to be. Like, the way that we were practicing medicine and we thought about ultrasonographers doing ultrasound scans that's how we were practicing medicine when we met Vios and Angie and decided to come together, like how we practice medicine and how we prioritize the patient, how we have phlebotomists draw blood, sonographers do ultrasound scans, like what nurses do. We it was just together. Now, I will tell you, Angie has upped the game. She's refined the process and we follow her lead. There is no, like, again, and Angie will be the first to say that. And the business people take a back seat, and Angie is a business person, but she is our clinical leader. So she decides patient flow, number of nurses to REI. She decides all of that. Now, again, the reason that these companies came together so easily is because we believed so many things. We were already practicing medicine. It's not like you had to take the client that you just mentioned that was comfortable doing 150 cases a year, and you had to put that culture with this culture. The cultures went together just like this, easily and seamlessly, because we already agreed that, truthfully, the REI is a subspecialist. This is a well-educated, they've been in medical school a very long time. I have a hard time asking any of our REIs, can you do an ultrasound scan? They will do it. They're happy to do it. They've done it before. It's just, a sonographer's doing 20 ultrasounds a day. An REI might, do 2 a week to help one out. So it goes back to, again, patient, what's in the best interest of the patient? Do you want somebody doing this twice a week or 20 times a day?
Well, let's talk about the best interest of the patient with regard to what you were talking about. Like you said, what Dr. Beltzos has been able to do with physician productivity is incredible. I was just recorded a different episode, different topic. We were talking about embryologists, and it was like, these embryologists are burnt out. They can't they can't do anymore but the demand is that, like, we were trying to get everything we possibly can out of these embryologists. And so there is a tension between what the market needs, the patient's need that you're trying to address, and what the capacity of the workforce is able to deliver. You said in the very beginning something that I don't like when CEOs say, Gina, because I try to make myself choose, which is employees come first, patients come first. Which is, do clients come first or do employees come first? Do managers come first or do customers come first?
Yeah.
And so like when you're trying to meet a demand and meet the market, and we know that the market demands 5 times more than what the field's putting out, you're trying to meet that. How do employees possibly come first?
Employees always come first. They have to, because the employees will take care. If you take care of your employees first, they will take care of your customer. They will take care of your patients. And that's when we're talking to doctors, and doctors say, well, I used to do that. We want the doctors to know that we can train and teach nurses and front desk managers and practice managers to be just as kind and just as empathetic to that patient that the doctor can. So again, employees always come first. As it relates to the lab, listen, there's a shortage of labor everywhere. It's the embryologist, there's a shortage. We know there's a shortage in REIs. We have to do a better job of training. We've been fortunate, we pay competitively. Our team members get equity. That's not true for 90% plus of the fertility clinics. And so I do think it was really, really difficult for us to hire the first 12 months, but in the last 12 months, there's quite a bit of incoming interest in career opportunities at Kindbody.
So then but I used to agree with the employees always come first, and I'm trying to actually live that out now. But I used to believe that in the axiom, I think Mark Spolestra said that we have it wrong, that we put shareholders first, then customers second, and employees last. And it should be employees, customers, shareholders, because if you take care of the employees, they'll take care of the customers, and that'll make the shareholders happy. And so, and I always did believe that until but what about when you get to this point that we're at, which is a bit historic, like this labor shortage that we're seeing, not just in the IVF, every place in the market, but it's like all right, I can take care of employees till the cows come home. Anybody's employees can go someplace else right now. You're trying to keep them out. And meanwhile, there's so much money in the marketplace that people are coming to you, and there's so much demand, and you're trying to, like, how do you do that now?
Yeah. I think, again, you have to utilize technology. So you have to go through the lab. Certainly that's what we're doing in practice management. So our product people shadow doctors and nurses to see what they do on a daily basis that's repetitive. Okay. What do you do every single day that's repetitive that should be moved to our EMR or patient portal or somebody else? Now, what needs to happen that we're probably not doing as good a job of, Griffin, is having our product people shadow the people in the lab. And it has to do with the sterile nature of the lab. It has to do with, I'm not even sure what it has to do with. And, Dr. Belchos could tell us, or even Dr. Morbeck, Dean Morbeck is our chief scientific officer. But we have to get arduous task and any task that can be moved to technology, and then you free up human labor. We've been able to do that on the practice side. We have not spent as much time refining that on the lab and embryology side. I'm optimistic that more economies of scale can come if you just spend time in the lab and say, what are you doing that's repetitive that should be moved to technology? I do know now we've rolled out some new technology platforms to help kind of ease the burden. And then there's this, like there's a training and an input of data and an export of data that is more time consuming for our embryologists than we would like. But you get through this kind of crunch time of about 3 months anytime you roll out new technology or implement a new SaaS solution. But we are constantly thinking about how we can use technology, whether it's our own or whether it's a third-party vendor, to free up humans, in this case, embryologists. But right now, embryologists are doing a lot of repetitive things that we think that can be moved to technology. Now, right now, they're still biopsying trifectoderms, like a lot of their stuff, they're still cryopreserving oocytes. They're still doing a lot of things that require extraordinary hand-eye coordination. And those things are not close to being automated, but there's still a lot of other things on their plate that can be automated.
Well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about what I really want to talk about, which is this global brand. Because this is the type of stuff that I am interested in. I am interested in brand. I am interested in creative messaging. And I think it is a huge mistake for anybody who thinks it's window dressing. That is not looking at it at all correctly. And I want to know if you think that I'm maybe exaggerating with this, but I don't think that Kindbody could have gone into all of these different angles to the depth that you have without the foundation of the brand that you had built. Am I overstating it?
No, but you're a marketer and a brand guy. You sound like me. Like, again, we knew it's not fertility. It's not IVF. It was intentional. Kindbody wants us as humans to be kind to our body. It also does not uniquely say IVF. It could be egg freezing. It could be same sex. Like, there's a lot of things that go into this name and this brand. It doesn't say Seattle. It doesn't say Charlotte. It doesn't say any particular city. It can be a global brand. But we thought about that from the very beginning, because I felt like healthcare was missing a real global brand. It's not blue. It's not pink. It's, yellow. We call it optimistic yellow. Yellow is intentionally gender neutral. A lot of people, if you do all of these customer surveys, which marketing people do, a lot of people don't. They just say, here's what I believe. And I'm like, whoa, did you do any research or did you do any customer surveys? But if you do customer surveys on your thoughts about yellow, lots of people associate yellow with happiness, right? Hope. Like, there's a lot that goes into this yellow and this name. And it's intentional. All of our locations is intentional. We don't have any hard edges in any of our clinics. There are no 90-degree desks. Everything is round. There's, again, a lot of thought that goes around this round desk, softening the edges. There are no medical degrees on the walls. Our REIs are highly educated. We don't need degrees from Brown University or Stanford on the wall. You probably, as an educated patient, know that I went to Stanford or to Brown. I didn't, but so we do. We believe there's huge power in brand. And now, we've been fortunate. There's a lot of affinity for the brand. And so now we're always working to extend the brand. And so now we spray paint and chalk every time we open a location. It's cool to be kind, right? Because we have to remember in this busy world, and this is before the war, and now there's a war, and there's just a lot of challenge. And so we have to remind people, be kind. It's cool to be kind, like lead with kindness, because kindness is contagious. It's like our yellow happiness, like, just be kind,
Brand-driven CEOs have such an advantage. Like you being a brand-driven, like when you look at, like, I think Sarah Blakely Spanks, Walt Disney, Richard Branson, like these are brand-driven CEOs, and so you are, the Kindbody is the furthest end of a spectrum. I actually have that spectrum, but on the other end of the spectrum is people who think nothing about brand whatsoever. And it's like, we have to, that's like a logo, or like colors. Yeah. Like have our marketing director just do something like that. And it is in everything that you do. And it's enabled you to go to all of these different places. And so I want to talk a little bit about like how that's moving along with the generations, because so we made a scale. We made a 4-point spectrum of the fertility brand, and decided on a 1, this is your advanced reproductive surgical associates of Smithfield, like the ones. And then the 2s is like Patel Fertility, I'm trying to make up Smithfield IVF. Right. Very on center. And then a 3 is like the nicest of your healthcare brands, got a familiar messaging. And Kindbody is one of the only, which we ranked every center in the entire US and Canada. Kindbody is one of maybe like the only 4s, like the one or like 1 to 3 4s. And so that, like, you're the first kind of consumer brand in this space. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's intentional, right? First of all, thank you, Griffin. Second of all, it's intentional. It didn't come after the fact. It was, we wanted to create a consumer brand. By the way, we also think now, like, and I know Peloton's been beaten up in the public markets, but we think about Peloton instead of SoulCycle. Like, we've talked about how magical Dr. Angie Baltzos is. Like, how can we get Dr. Angie Baltzos to be Ali Love or Robin Azar or Jess King? Like, how can you make Dr. Angie Baltzos global, right? And so we are constantly thinking about the brand and about how we protect the brand and how we continue to do right by the brand, how even in the most difficult, challenging situations, we're kind to each other, kind to competitors. We call them peers. Peers is a more friendly term than competitors. So it's in our language, it's in our culture, like how we protect each other, how we protect this brand, how we cultivate the brand. But again, it was very intentional from the beginning. When you come to any of our clinics, or even if you go to the patient portal, most patient portals are ugly. Most EMRs are ugly. Everything, when we should at some point give you a product demo. When you come into our product through the technology, everything is very elegant. Everything is yellow. Not everything is yellow because we have neutrals and other colors, but it is aesthetically pleasing, right? And so you can see all these touch points along the way. We predict your likelihood of success. We predict how many eggs we think you're going to get. We predict fertilization rates. We show your embryos growing. We are completely transparent. And again, when you go into the clinics, it's not white, right? There are no white coats. There are no white walls. There's no white paper. 50% of our REIs are BIPOC. I am incredibly proud of that, because guess what? Our patients are 43% BIPOC. That goes back between 43 and 50%, but it's intentional. If you really create a mission that says, we want to increase accessibility for all, then you have to have a brand, you have to have visual elements, you have to have clinics that look and speak to accessibility for all. And that's not white walls or white coats or white paper.
And it corresponds with the generations too. So on our scale, we laid it across the generation. Like, so you picture the generations as like a news ticker. And it's not that a one was like one equals baby boomer. It's just that like the overlay of a one is that it was designed or lack of design for the baby boom generation. Then a two was, bit baby boomer, bit X. And three was mostly X, a little bit millennial. And so the fours, which you're one of very few, is the first brand that's for millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah. Again, a large portion of our new patients come from Instagram. Look at Dr. Beltsos or Ruhi Jalani or any of our doctors, and we encourage them to do that. Like we are kind, but we're also fun and competitive. And we're like, okay, who can, create our competitions? Like who could create the funniest TikTok video? Like, I don't know. We're having fun practicing medicine, helping our patients build the families of their dreams. And that doesn't have to be white and sterile and old, right? It can be fresh and it can be fun. And so, when we think about brand, we have competitions of who can create the most fun TikTok video. The majority of REIs that got your 1, 2, and maybe even some of your 3s are like, TikTok, like, is that tic-tac-toe? What is TikTok? And so, but we are constantly thinking, we want to be better than we are today. All of us do. That's the competition in us. Okay. We have an extraordinary brand today. Like, how do we take it up a notch? And we're trying to think about what's happening new on Instagram. And do we call our locations, like, is it Kindbody ATL? Is it Kindbody Bay Area? Do you start then to segment these markets, or is it just one brand? But we think about brand every single day. We think about culture every single day.
Talk about how those two are together, because I'm just finishing an article called "The Difference Between Brand and Culture," where they converge and where they diverge. And so I think, like so many, I'm finally starting to get people interested in branding and creative messaging for like how they set expectations with their patients and how they get their team to be cohesive around something, as opposed to, they don't care about patient acquisition right now because everybody's slammed. That's how I started in this marketing field, was marketing patient acquisition. But it's like, no, this is how you get people in as a part of something. So I want you to talk about the culture, because I'm thinking like, Gina, before I look at somebody's LinkedIn profile to like see what I know that they went to work for Kindbody because I see them in the yellow, in the background. And so talk a bit about how you use the brand for culture.
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with humility, right? The brand is humble. It's not anybody's last name. It's not, and our culture really starts with this humility, right? So those two things are ingrained. I think it's not just humility too, it's a vulnerability to it. It's also our brand and our culture. We do embrace risk. We tell our doctors, we're like, embrace risk, do something crazy on TikTok. Can you tell a doctor or a scientist embrace risk? They're like, whoa, I'm a doctor, I don't embrace risk. Except that if you teach them, we're not talking about embracing risk when it comes to a prognosis of an onco patient. We're talking about taking risk as it relates to the brand, as it relates to culture. Allow yourself to have fun, allow yourself to smile. Giving devastating news, another failed pregnancy test, is hard. It's hard. And we're so glad you're empathetic to your patient. But outside of that, how can we make you smile? How can you be cheery and yellow and optimistic? And so we believe that there's a lot of similarities, that brand and culture do go together. And I don't think our brand would be as successful if our culture wasn't so strong. And I don't think our culture would be so strong if our brand wasn't so strong. And I think the other thing that I would say about culture and brand is team, right? I think too often, healthcare people and doctors in particular may think solo first, like I'm a doctor, and hierarchical and solo. And those are not things that belong in our brand or our culture. We don't do anything singularly, not any of us. And Dr. Beltsos would say the same thing, and Beth Exbach, Greg Pullis, none of us do anything by ourselves, and that's intentional. We make group collaborative decisions. And same thing with our brand. We invite feedback, we invite constructive feedback, constructive criticism, because we want to get better every day. And again, that goes back to our brand and our culture.
And with recruitment too, I have to believe that that's giving you an edge, because just look, all right, so you look at a baby boomers, who's answering your phones?
Yeah.
Who's not even the answer, who are the docs now, who's buying in? And so I have to believe that, it's like in these places that are like, we're busy as can be with new patients, but what is it like with people that, like, do they want to come work for you? Like, are they excited about, are they behind a mission together that they will go and express to their friends of like, this is who I effing work for, and you better know about them?
They are, and they do. That's recent, though. It's just in the last 12 to 18 months. Dr. Lynn Westfall was our first REI and our chief medical officer. And it was hard, even with Lynn's reputation. And she has an extraordinary reputation and is a member of SART, a legacy member and of ASRM and SART, and a phenomenal reputation. But remember, doctors, I said, are notoriously risk adverse. You encourage them to take risk, and they're like, whoa. And so in the beginning, Kindbody was, another startup. And, we started in a mobile clinic that was oriented towards the brand and service. We're going to bring care. Whoa, Griffin. We're going to bring care to the consumer. You don't have to come to me. I'm going to come to you. And the doctors are like, whoa. You have a mobile clinic. You're going to the patient. We don't do that. Patients come see me. They wait months to see me. And I'm like, why are you bragging about patients waiting to see you? Like, something's unconscionable that a doctor would brag that you have these long wait lists. What? Don't stop bragging. Stop bragging. It's not good for the patients. So,
that's thinking like an individual contributor as opposed to an entrepreneur, though, because the entrepreneur wants to scale, the individual contributor wants, it's like, oh, sweet, I'm the best.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think now there is, we have, if you count all of our providers, the APPs, the REIs, the OBGYNs, there's 65 or 70 of them now. Maybe it's 75 or 80. I'm losing, but there's enough now in the industry that they do call and say, hey, is Kindbody hiring? We have in our Slack channel, we have a new hire, and there's a big referral network through the doctors and the embryologists. So it's gotten significantly easier in the last 12 to 18 months. And then again, you look at these extraordinary leaders on the clinical side, and again, both our scientific lab side as well as our practice side.
I know the criticism that I'm going to get after this episode, which is I've been blowing sunshine for Kindbody for the last 15 minutes. And so no, I'm not, because one, I can't evaluate you on a clinical level. I am not qualified to do that ever. Yep. And even I'm not qualified to evaluate you all on many of the areas of your business model. I don't know if they're good or bad. What my wheelhouse is brand and creative messaging. And for those of everybody listening knows that that's what I care about most. And I'm not making this up. You can look at our scale. If you want, you can look at our spectrum. It's empirical. Kindbody is a 4 on that. And I think that it is a huge advantage that the other networks don't have. Again, you're blowing sunshine. No, I'm not. This is an advantage. The other networks have a disadvantage of their IGA. If anybody remembers the IGA, or like a True Value, they bought hardware stores. Yeah. Where Kindbody has the Starbucks advantage. I think it's such a disadvantage for these networks that are going for scale to not have any of the advantages of scale that come from brand, which is not window dressing for all of the reasons that we just talked about. Instead of we're Joe's Coffee in Seattle, brought to you by we're we're coffee roasters of Denver, brought to you by so-and-so over here, versus we're Starbucks, we're Starbucks, we're Starbucks. Right. And that there's something about that pretty lady in green that unites the customer to be able to recognize something, that unites them to be able to express it themselves, as opposed to just someplace else, and the employees that want to and do work for there. It's like, this is what we're about. And so when did you know that was going to be a thing? Like, did you think about doing it the other way at first? Like, oh, well, maybe we'll be a network. And
no, we were always going to establish a brand. We were always going to have these warm colors. We had 3 focus groups, 3 dinners and 3 focus groups. So 6 meetings. And we would poll the audience. Do you like yellow? Do you like purple? Do you like warm? Do you like hard edges? Do you like blue? Like, this brand is where it is because we gave the brand to consumers, to future patients, to existing patients and future patients. And then we had, and this is before COVID, we had in-person meetings. We sent out surveys. We still survey patients. We want to know, because I think if you establish a brand 3.5 years ago, you ought to check in on it every 4 to 6 months to say, hey, am I on the right track? We measure NPS. We are maniacal. We have a 90 NPS, which is unheard of in the healthcare field. It's definitely unheard of in the fertility field, but we measure we want to know from patients how we're doing. We want to know that patients have this affinity for the brand. We want doctors and nurses and our front desk team to feel an affinity and a protector of this brand. So, thank you for the accolades and the kudos. If you were able to measure our clinical success rates, like we have a responsibility to report to the CDC and SART, you will see that they are above the national average. Now, they're above the national average because we are big proponents of PGTA, but they are in line with our peer group. And I think that was, everybody said, okay, you can build a brand, but maybe your clinical quality would have to sacrifice. Oh, well, how are you able to offer an IVF cycle at 25 to 30% less than everybody else? Like, you use technology. Dr. Nicole Noyes just joined Kindbody in New York, and patients are now going to be able to see Dr. Noyes at 30% less than they were paying at Northwell NYU. Okay. I am ecstatic about that. I am so happy for a patient, because many patients, that 30% additional charge would have been out of reach, much less patients that have to go through 2 or 3 or 4 cycles. So we continue to be on a mission to provide more accessibility for all, a premium experience without a premium price tag.
I want to say something about Kindbody that I've been reluctant to say about 2 other companies too. And the reason I haven't said this is either in an article or on the show is because I think that people will either think that I'm insulting them or that I'm propagating them. And I'm really not doing either. I'm really just saying, mucho ojo, pay attention, like really pay attention to what they're doing, that I don't feel get enough respect. And so I mean, like, I'm saying I don't feel like they get enough respect. What I mean is pay attention. And that's you all, it's Fertility IQ, it's CNY Fertility. And so like where you are in this journey, I don't remember if it was Nelson Mandela or Desmond Tutu that says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they join it. Where do you feel you are on that trajectory?
It's hard to group everybody in the same bucket, because I think, I think some are still fighting, some have already joined, and then some are still making fun of us, despite our clinical success rates, despite we have 84 clients, they're Fortune 50 customers, they're big blue chip customers. We have a sign in every single Kindbody location, and we have lots of art, because we think art goes back to the quality of the brand. But there's a sign that says, underestimate me. That will be fun. And so listen, we don't mind. Like, I've had a lot of criticism throughout my career. You get tougher at it. You get accustomed to the criticism because you're doing something new. So underestimate me. That'll be fun.
What is on the horizon for you all? What does Kindbody need to accomplish in the next year, or and more interesting, like what's going to happen next with the brand?
Again, we've talked a little bit about it, but I think you'll see the brand globally. And I think you're going to see the brand more in anything, Griffin, where we let go of the patient. If you prioritize the patient, but then you send the patient out for genetic testing, or you send the patient out for carrier screening, or you send the patient out for donor egg or donor sperm or surrogacy, when we let go of our patient, that makes us nervous because we are maniacal about patient care. And we're not sure that all of the other people that we're referring the business to are as patient-centered as we are. Yes, we trust them. They're our partner today. But I do think you'll see us extend the brand to other ancillary businesses where we may be outsourcing now. We're going to pull those services in-house. I want us to be a leading brand amongst same-sex men, amongst single moms by choice. We've done a really great job. I was going to say same-sex women, but we have a lot of same-sex women that trust this brand. But I just want it, we're so oriented towards this mission to increase accessibility for all.
Why didn't venture come into this before? So when I have David Sable on this show, we talk about private equity. They're buying clinics. It's their model to buy clinics. Venture capital is looking for something that will scale. So they're normally looking at like AI or software, other kinds of tech, because they want that scale. And many of them don't feel like, oh yeah, a clinic model is something that we can scale. How were you able to pitch this to venture to say, oh yeah, this isn't a private equity play. This is actually something that we can scale?
It probably goes back to track record. I think venture capital people are fearful of CapEx heavy businesses like standing up 4-wall clinics. Before we hired a single doctor or stood up a clinic, we own our own technology. We invest in it. We have 55 engineers in engineering and IT and DevOps. So there is definitely a tech play. It's one of the reasons our doctors can be more efficient. They can see more cases because we're not doing all the menial work. I still, I know the VC community, and so it was significantly easier this time to raise money than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So, venture investors, all institutional investors like pattern recognition, and they say, oh, Gina's been able to do this before. Gina's, this is, Kindbody is my third company in women's health. It's my fifth startup, which just means I'm crazy. But, crazy fun. Like it does get easier. You're able to build teams easier. You're able to raise money easier. Kindbody has challenges like every other business that's growing has challenges. But today, when we see a challenge versus 10 years ago, in many cases, I know the answer, or I know the person who knows the answer, versus when you're just younger or you're a newer entrepreneur, you spend a lot of time evaluating the answer to that question that was just posed. Today, questions and problems come up, but I'm like, oh, I've seen this one before. Here's what we should do, And same thing with Dr. Beltsos or Ann Beth Eschbach or Greg or Lynn or any of our team. Like, you have an incredibly experienced team with a long depth of knowledge in scaling other organizations. And that's one of the things that's allowed us to execute this quickly in this short amount of time, this well, is a testament to the experience of this team. If Dr. Beltsos and I tried to do this 12 years ago when we first met at PCRS, and she had on these Christian Louboutins, I'm like, I am in love with this woman. I don't think we would have been as successful 12 years. It'd be interesting to ask her that. But 12 years ago, we just didn't have that same level of knowledge, of experience.
That's why I am, my client services firm is completely cash growth, because this is my learning speed.
Yeah.
It's my learning speed. I will probably do faster things in the future, but I'm really trying to nail the fundamentals right now, and cash growth has allowed me to do that. So for those that raise so much money and do it so quickly, it's well,
I don't know how old you are, Griffin, but let's assume that Dr. Beltsos and I are at least a decade older than you, and that's the experience I'm talking about. So Does that help?
There's hope for the rest of us. Is what I will let you conclude. Gina, our audience is REIs, it's fellows, it's practice owners. There are a lot of PE and venture people that pop into this podcast when they're doing their all of their due diligence and studying of the field. So how do you want to conclude to that audience?
Yeah, we've been incredibly blessed. And I just want to thank, I think the criticism makes us stronger and makes us better. And then those that have been huge, enormous cheerleaders, thank you. Thank you, Griffin. It's been great for you to come to the industry as well and really elevate marketing. I was a marketing CEO, a brand CEO. And so it's good to have other cheerleaders that talk about marketing and brand in the field. So thank you. Thank you. We've been blessed. And
it's what the field was crying out for, a D student to come in and build a client services firm slowly.
Love it. Thank you, Griffin.
Thanks for coming on, Gina. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.